The certified letter arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, its legal weight somehow heavier than the paper it was printed on. Daniel Reeves, 43, a civil engineer who'd spent 20 years designing municipal infrastructure, read the HOA violation notice 3 times before the words fully registered. Remove the pool. The in-ground saltwater pool he'd meticulously installed 18 months ago. The pool his daughter used for physical therapy after her accident. The pool he'd gotten written approval for before breaking ground. Patricia Winters, the newly elected HOA president, had signed the demand personally, her tight script practically radiating smugness across the page. 3 months of increasingly aggressive notices. 3 months of Daniel explaining, providing documentation, citing bylaws. 3 months of being dismissed like a child who didn't understand the rules. But today, that ended. Because what Patricia and her board didn't know was that civil engineers don't just build things. They also know exactly how to legally dismantle them, including homeowner associations. Before we dive into how Daniel dismantled an entire HOA to keep his pool, if you love stories where entitled board members learn they picked the wrong fight, hit that like button and subscribe. Trust me, you'll want to see how this unfolds. This is a story in 3 parts. The violation that pushed a meticulous professional past his breaking point, the confrontation where documentation became devastation, and the resolution where one man legally dissolved the very organization trying to control him. The first part reveals Daniel's journey through bureaucratic hell. Every approval he'd obtained, every rule he'd followed, every desperate attempt to reason with people who'd already decided he was guilty, the emotional toll of watching his daughter's recovery threatened by petty tyranny, the sleepless nights spent researching, the moment he stopped defending himself and started building his case, the stack of documents that grew thicker while his patience grew thinner. The breaking point that transformed a peaceful engineer into something far more dangerous, a peaceful engineer with a plan. The second part captures the board meeting where Daniel finally spoke. The confidence Patricia radiated walking in, the binders he placed on the table, the color draining from faces as he revealed what 18 months of research had uncovered. Property surveys that didn't match HOA maps, bylaws that contradicted state law, meeting minutes that documented fraud. The moment power shifted completely. The ultimatum that left the board speechless and the community watching. The third part delivers justice that nobody saw coming. Not just keeping his pool, but exposing corruption that ran deeper than anyone imagined. Board members resigning in disgrace. Homeowners discovering they'd been lied to for years. Legal consequences that rippled through leadership. The vote that changed everything. Daniel's daughter swimming while he watched from a property that was finally, truly his. Daniel Reeves had designed 3 municipal water treatment facilities, 2 highway overpasses, and the drainage system for an entire suburban development before he turned 40. Precision wasn't just his profession, it was his personality. When he'd purchased the corner lot house in Meadowbrook Estates 6 years ago, he'd read every page of the HOA covenant. When his daughter Emma, now 14, had been hit by a distracted driver 2 years ago and her physical therapist recommended aquatic therapy, Daniel had submitted a pool installation application with 47 pages of supporting documentation, architectural drawings, contractor licenses, liability insurance, fence specifications that exceeded requirements. He'd attended 2 board meetings to answer questions. He'd received written approval, signed by then-President Robert Chen, with an official HOA stamp. The pool had cost $78,000. Every permit was proper. Every inspection passed. Emma had regained 60% of her mobility using it. The first notice arrived 3 weeks after Patricia Winters took over as HOA president. Curt and impersonal, it claimed his pool violated aesthetic guidelines established in 2019. Daniel had frowned, pulled his approval documents from his meticulously organized files, and responded within 24 hours with copies of everything. The pool predated those guidelines. He had written approval. He'd attached photos showing the pool was barely visible from the street, exactly as designed. 2 weeks later, a second notice arrived. This one threatened fines of $200 per day. Daniel had driven to Patricia's house that evening, documents in hand, voice calm and reasonable. She'd answered the door in yoga clothes, her expression already bored before he finished introducing himself. "The board has reconsidered," she'd said, arms crossed. "Previous approvals can be revoked if structures don't align with community standards." When Daniel pointed out that wasn't in the bylaws, she'd smiled, cold and practiced. "Maybe you should read them more carefully." She'd closed the door before he could respond. The third notice, delivered by certified mail 30 days later, included a lawsuit threat. Daniel had called an emergency board meeting, paid the $50 request fee, and prepared a presentation. He'd shown up with Emma, who'd brought her physical therapy progress reports. He'd shown up with his attorney. He'd shown up ready to prove definitively that he'd done everything right. Patricia had canceled the meeting 6 hours beforehand via email, citing scheduling conflicts. No reschedule date offered. That night, Daniel had sat in his home office until 3 in the morning, something dangerous and determined settling into his chest. If they wanted to play games with documentation, they'd pick the wrong opponent. Civil engineers lived in documentation. He'd started with the HOA's corporate filings, then the original development plats, then property surveys, then every meeting minute posted online for the past decade. What he found made him stop breathing. The rabbit hole went deeper than a pool dispute. It went straight down to the foundation of whether Meadowbrook Estates HOA had any legal authority at all. Daniel spent 2 weeks barely sleeping, cross-referencing county records against HOA claims, state law against covenant provisions, reality against what homeowners had been told. The evidence piled up on his desk like ammunition. If they wanted to take his pool, he'd take their entire power structure. And on September 14th, when the next board meeting was scheduled, everything was finally ready. The Meadowbrook Estates Community Center. Conference room smelled like cheap coffee and floor. Polish when Daniel walked in at 6:57 p.m. Patricia sat at the head table, flanked by 4 board members. Her navy blazer screaming authority she assumed was unquestionable. 23 homeowners filled the audience chairs, the most attendance Daniel had seen in 6 years. Word had spread about his pool battle. People were curious. Patricia's smile when she saw him was razor-thin. "Mr. Reeves, so glad you could finally make it to a meeting." Daniel said nothing. He placed 3 identical black binders on the table before her, each spine labeled with careful precision. HOA Legal Review, D. Reeves, P.E. The professional engineer credential after his name wasn't accidental. He'd paid for that title with exams and experience. Tonight, he'd use it. Patricia opened her binder with exaggerated boredom, then froze. Page 1 was a property survey map of the entire development, marked up with red annotations. Page 2 was the original HOA covenant filed with the county in 1987. Page 3 was the current version on the HOA website. They weren't the same document. Daniel let the silence stretch for 15 seconds before speaking, his voice carrying the measured calm of someone delivering devastating news. Patricia Winters, age 46, 2847 Windmere Court. Vice President Mark Chen, age 51, 3102 Ashford Lane. Treasurer Linda Kowalski, age 39, 56 Parkside Drive. Secretary James Delgado, age 62, 3401 Meadowbrook Circle. He recited each address from memory, watching their faces shift from confusion to unease. "I know where each of you live because I've personally visited the county assessor's office to examine every property record in this development. I know your lot numbers, your purchase prices, your property tax assessments. I know these things because I'm an engineer, and engineers verify information before. He flipped to page 7 in their binders. This is the 1987 covenant that every property deed references. It established a homeowner association with voluntary membership and specifically stated that membership could not be compulsory under Texas Property Code Section 209. 04. Patricia's face had gone white. Daniel continued, relentless. This is the 2003 amended covenant that your website claims supersedes the original. Notice anything missing? He tapped the signature page. County clerk filing stamp. Notarization. Proper homeowner vote documentation. This amendment was never legally filed. It doesn't exist in county records, which means for 22 years this HOA has been operating under a covenant that has no legal standing. Mark Chen started to interrupt. Daniel raised one hand. I'm not finished. Page 15 shows 3 years of financial records I obtained through a formal records request. Notice the landscaping contract with Winters Landscape Solutions, owned by Patricia's husband, Ryan Winters. $460,000 over 3 years. No competitive bidding, no disclosure to homeowners. Page 22 shows board meeting minutes where votes were recorded with more votes cast than board members present. Page 30 shows architectural review fees totaling $93,000 deposited into accounts that aren't listed in annual budgets. Page 41 shows 17 families who paid special assessment fees for a playground that was never built. The room had gone absolutely silent. Homeowners were pulling out phones, taking photos of their binder pages. Patricia's hands trembled slightly as she flipped through the documentation. Daniel leaned forward, his voice dropping to something colder. You demanded I remove a pool I got written approval for. A pool my disabled daughter needs. So I did what engineers do. I checked your math. And your entire organization is built on fraud, financial mismanagement, and legal fictions. So here's what happens next. He stood, commanding the room completely. Option 1, you continue this fight. I file formal complaints with the Texas Attorney General, the County District Attorney, and the State Real Estate Commission. I bring this documentation to every family you find, threatened, or bullied over the past 2 decades. I hire an attorney, and we dismantle this HOA piece by piece in civil court. Your landscaping contracts become criminal fraud investigations. Your names become public record in every filing. Or option 2. He paused, watching hope flicker in their eyes. You resign. Tonight. All of you. You issue a formal retraction of every violation notice against my property. You call an emergency homeowner meeting within 30 days to vote on dissolving this legally dubious organization or properly reforming it under actual legal counsel. And you never, ever contact me about my pool again. Patricia's voice came out hoarse. You can't just dissolve an HOA. Daniel smiled for the first time all evening. Actually, under Texas Property Code Section 209.0041, homeowners can vote to terminate an HOA with a majority vote if the governing documents allow it, which yours do in the 1987 version that's actually filed with the county. I've already drafted the petition. 47 families have signed it. That's 62% of the development. So yes, Patricia, I absolutely can. He closed his binder with a decisive snap. You have until tomorrow at 5 p.m. to resign and issue the retraction. After that, I make phone calls. Choose wisely. He walked out while they sat in stunned silence, their power evaporating like water under Texas sun. The resignations came via email at 4:43 p.m. the next day. All 5 board members worded identically, clearly written by the same attorney. The retraction letter arrived at Daniel's house by 6 p.m. hand-delivered by a nervous Mark Chen, who couldn't meet his eyes. "We didn't know," he muttered, "about the landscaping contracts, the missing records. Patricia ran everything." Daniel took the letter without comment. Knowing or not knowing didn't change what they'd tried to do to his family. The emergency homeowner meeting happened 26 days later in the community center, packed with 143 residents, 91% of the development. Daniel presented his findings methodically, every claim backed by documentation projected on screens. The gasps started when he showed the landscaping contracts. The anger built when he revealed the missing playground funds. The fury peaked when he explained that legally, most of them had never actually been bound by HOA rules at all. 3 attorneys lived in Meadowbrook Estates. All 3 stood up to verify Daniel's research was accurate. The vote took 11 minutes. Dissolve the HOA entirely. 87 votes. Reform under proper legal structure with new elections. 31 votes. Maintain current structure, 0 votes. Meadowbrook Estates, HOA ceased to exist at 8:42 p.m. on October 19th, but the fallout was just beginning. Patricia Winter's husband lost his landscaping contracts with 2 other HOAs once Daniel's documentation went public. The county opened an investigation into the financial irregularities. 3 families filed civil suits to recover special assessment fees. Patricia and Ryan listed their house for sale 6 weeks later, gone before Christmas. Linda Kowalski, the treasurer, cooperated with investigators and received immunity. She admitted she'd raised concerns about the contracts years ago and been shut down. James Delgado disappeared from neighborhood events entirely, his wife fielding questions with tight-lipped non-answers. Daniel stood in his backyard on a Saturday, morning 2 months after the dissolution, watching Emma swim laps with her physical therapist. 75% mobility now. The doctors were calling it remarkable. His neighbor Tom walked over with 2 beers. A ritual they'd developed since the meeting. "You know you're a legend now, right?" Tom said. "Janet from Ashford Lane wants you to run for city council." Daniel laughed, accepting the beer. "I just wanted to keep my pool." But they both knew it was more than that. It was about being told you're wrong when you've done everything right. It was about bureaucrats drunk on tiny power. It was about standing up when standing up felt impossible. The pool's filter hummed quietly, a sound Daniel had grown to love. Emma finished her lap and waved, grinning. The fence was exactly 6 feet tall, as approved. The landscaping was exactly as designed. Everything was precisely as it should be. 3 former board members still lived in the neighborhood, walking past Daniel's house on evening strolls with studied casualness, never making eye contact. The development had formed a voluntary neighborhood association with no enforcement powers, just social events and community beautification. People actually showed up to meetings now. Daniel had been asked to serve as an advisor. He'd declined. He'd done what needed doing. The property values had increased after the dissolution. Turned out buyers liked neighborhoods without mandatory HOA fees and architectural review boards. Real estate agents mentioned it in listings. Meadowbrook Estates. No HOA. Daniel had framed the original approval letter from Robert Chen, hung it in his office next to his engineering license. A reminder that doing things right mattered. That documentation mattered. That standing up to bullies with facts and law wasn't just possible, it was necessary. Emma climbed out of the pool wrapped in a towel, moving with confidence that had been stolen by a careless driver and slowly rebuilt through determination and warm salt water. Dad, can Morgan come over tomorrow? She wants to try the pool. Daniel smiled. Of course. His daughter ran inside, trailing wet footprints. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across water that perfectly reflected the sky. No violation notices. No threatening letters. No one to answer to except himself and the reasonable laws that actually protected homeowners instead of controlling them. Daniel had learned that sometimes justice doesn't come from compromise. Sometimes it comes from someone finally doing the research, showing the receipts, and refusing to back down. And as he sat there watching the water ripple in the evening breeze, his daughter's laughter floating through open windows, he felt something he hadn't felt in months. Peace. Complete, undisturbed, well-documented peace. Across the country, in Portland, Oregon, retired IRS Auditor Margaret Flynn received a letter from her condo association demanding she remove the bird feeders from her balcony. Margaret smiled, the same expression that once preceded forensic financial investigations that destroyed fraudulent corporations, and opened her laptop. She'd been bored in retirement anyway. 20 minutes later, she'd found 6 years of inconsistent expense reports and a board president who'd somehow renovated his unit using association funds meant for roof repairs. Please, she murmured, pouring tea. Keep sending me threatening letters. I haven't had this much fun since I audited that hedge fund. The board president had no idea his world was about to collapse. But that's a story for another time.